All right. Well, tonight we're going to dig into the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, our highest inspiration, actually, someone who loved deeply like an avatar. And so he was talking about grace last week and telling us that if we had God's grace, there was nothing that we needed to be worried about. And then someone asked, oh no, that M's going to ask that tonight. And so they were lamenting a little bit, like, well, why do we have to run about so much if everything is taken care of in grace and we're so well couched in grace? Why is it that we have to run around? And so it starts off tonight. We're on page 116. And he says, but why should God make us run about? Thought M, after he heard Ramakrishna tell that story. And immediately Ramakrishna said, it is his will that we should run about a little. Excuse me. Then it is great fun. God has created the world in play, as it were. This is called Mahamaya, the great illusion. Therefore, one must take refuge in the Divine Mother, the cosmic power itself. It is she who has bound us with the shackles of illusion. The realization of God is possible only when those shackles are severed. So this world is play. Now it's hard to imagine that because we don't know that we're playing. If we knew that we were playing, then it would be fun. If we knew that nobody was actually being hurt and nobody was actually suffering, if we could understand the reality that it is all God, all the divine play, the divine dream, as it were, you know, and to know that really, if you think about it in the higher sense, God is you. God has taken your form and is living your life as an experiment of divine love. Everything, your realization is you, your ego self, surrendering to that knowledge, knowing that you were just a figment. You as the ego self, you with the named self, was just a figment. You were taking responsibility for things you had nothing to do with. You were living a life that really and truly you had no real control over. It was all a play. And you come to realize that the life you lived as you lived it was beautiful because everything that you do, and this is for everyone, it's a hard thing to accept, but it's a wonderful thing to contemplate and kind of work on understanding it, that the one motivational power in the world, Vivekananda says, is love, this divine love. And so we all do the things that we do out of love. Each one of our lives is that story of love. When we're making choices, we choose the thing that we want or that we like. When we think about our future, we think about a future that we want or we like. And so even our mistakes, it's like sometimes we love something that harms somebody. We love power or we love pleasure or we love wealth or whatnot. And we sometimes will express that in a way that's not beneficial to others. So it's not a divine love, it's an egoistic love, but it's love nonetheless. And so our life is motivated by love. And as we purify, which means to come to understand the nature of that love is divine and not egotistical, not attached to a body mind, then that love becomes expressed more clearly, more freely, more equanimously. And we see just what we were talking about with some of these great sadhus, these great saints that have lived beautiful lives with a purified love, a love that everybody felt and that everybody appreciates. And really, in religion, our goal of realization, if it's a goal, it's our gift of realization, that is simply us coming to that understanding and surrendering to it, and then living a life without ego, a life that's not selfish, not centered on a body, mind, personality, but is centered on seeing ourselves, seeing God, the divine, in everyone. And so here, Ramakrishna is saying that it's his will that we should run around a little, that life should be a little challenging. It makes the play interesting. It keeps us searching. It keeps us wondering what's going on. It keeps us wondering who we are. What is this all about? And when someone passes away, like when Swami B went, what a beautiful time because it really faces us with the real. The fact that this is not us, this has an expiration date, and everybody goes. That there's no sense in seeing it as a sad thing. There's no sense in seeing it as a scary or bad or thing like that. This is life as life is. There's as much life in dying as there is in being born. And so we accept it as our lot and as our part, as the next transition, the next uh the next moving on, getting a new tool. If we're going to continue the game, if we're in a situation where we want to continue playing, we get everything new and we go down and we start again. We pick up where we left off and we bring all of the advantages with us, and we continue learning and continue growing and continue understanding until Mother lifts that veil from us. And if we're done playing, we cry for Mother. We don't want to go back anymore, and we don't go back again. We merge into the whole. So this is called Mahamaya, the great illusion. One must take refuge in the Divine Mother, the cosmic power itself. So Mother, the very energy of your thinking, is the manifestation of the Divine Mother. All of the love that you feel, all of the sensations, I mean, anything that changes is Shakti. It's the power of the Divine Mother. So all of the love that you experience in your life in this realm is because of the presence of the Divine Mother in you. That feeling of love that you have is the presence of the Divine Mother within you. You are using her love to love. You are using her love to recognize love. You're using her existence to go through all of this. It is her in you that gives you existence, that gives you love, and that gives you intelligence or wisdom. So this game, this play of the divine, it's a marvelous dance. It's a marvelous dance, and it's a joyful dance, and that includes every bit of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they are the backdrop of perfection. They are the thing that keep us looking for perfection, learning of perfection, learning of the divine love, the divine will. It is she who has bound us with the shackles of illusion. The realization of God is possible only when those shackles are severed. The Master continued, one must propitiate the Divine Mother, the primal energy, in order to obtain God's grace. God himself is Mahamaya, who deludes the world with her illusion and conjures up the magic of creation, of preservation and destruction. She has spread this veil of ignorance before our eyes. We can go into the inner chamber only when she lets us pass through the door. Living outside, we see only outer objects, but not that eternal being, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. Therefore, it is stated in the Purana that deities like Brahma praised Mahamaya for the destruction of the demons, Madhu and Kaitava. So this wonderful, you see the interchange there. I mean, God is separate from Mother and then is Mother, and just how it all works in unison together in perfect harmony like that. And that she'll let you in. We think, well, why doesn't she let us all in? We blame her, like, well, she's not letting me in. What's wrong with her? How come she doesn't she love me? Doesn't she care about me? Doesn't she want me to be there with her? And that's an ego yelling, because Mother says very clearly, you're welcome to come in anytime you want, but you have to want it. If you come to the temple, you have to want to go in, and she'll make sure that you want to go in. She'll offer you all of those things. You remember in that Katha Upanishad, when Nachiketas is talking to the king of death, and he's telling the king of death, I want to know the truth. I want to know what this is all about, what happens when we die, what is the nature of the soul. I want to know these things. And the king of death is like, oh, sure, but wouldn't you rather have a long life? Look, I can give you a long life. I can give you more money than you can imagine. I can give you celestial nymphs of divine beauty. Wouldn't you rather have all of those things? And, of course, Nachiketus was praised because he stuck to his guns. No, I don't want anything. I want knowledge. I want to know the truth. And you can see it in the avatars also, right? When Buddha, just before his realization, the Divine Mother, Mara, comes and dances before him and offers him all of these things. And he sits there deep in meditation. No, I want the divine alone. I want you. And he had his realization. Jesus went out to the hilltop in the desert, remember, after fasting for what, some crazy 40 days or something, stands there. And again, that Shakti power, of course, in the Christian world, they make it the demon Satan. And he offers them, he says, no, 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 come, do this, don't throw yourself off the cliff. Test God to see if he really loves you. I'll give you all the wealth in the world. I'll make you the king of the world. And Jesus also kept his eyes on the truth, right? Said, no, I don't want it. And so that's our lesson, because, at those moments when we're weak, when we're identified with the body and the mind, and we're feeling those hungers of those characters and the characteristics of that smallness, and we're offered the things of this world, that's our moment to say, I'm not going to be stupid. I'm not going to be silly. I want you, Ma. I want you. See, I'm making that choice here and now. I want you and you alone. And so this play of the divine, it's not Mother that's keeping you out of your realization. It's not Mother that won't let you in the house. It's you who doesn't want to go in the house. You're busy playing on your own. We enjoy this ego world. We enjoy being in charge. We enjoy making our own choices. We enjoy our pleasures. We endure our pains, for the things that we think are worth enduring pain for. And we go on through this. That's the nature of the game, the play.
Swami,
Yes, Mel.
question. My brain kind of shuts down when we start talking about it's a game, haha. Mother's having fun. That's all good and well with my little petty issue problems. But there are people with like really creepy problems, like trauma problems. And I just don't get the ha-ha lightness, and I get distracted, with, like Ethiopian schoolgirls being abducted, that kind of
Sure.
thing. Like this mother thinks this is lovely, or this is like a good learning experience. I think I need a review of that before I can move
Yeah.
forward.
No, it's all right to see it that way, because I mean that's where we are at, and how we view it. And in the way that we are now, it's not proper for us to just ha ha ha, look, there's nothing going on there. We can only do that for ourselves. We don't have permission to laugh at the will and suffering of others, or we have permission to laugh at our own suffering, and to grow in that understanding of it being a play in regards to ourselves. In regards to the rest of the world, until we see the rest of the world as ourselves, we're not ready to laugh it off with the Divine Mother. What we have to do is be true to our nature of love, our nature of wisdom, and to alleviate suffering, right? That's our nature. And so we play our part in the world as long as we believe our part in the world. Mother has access to a perspective and a knowledge of the nature of things that we don't have access to. She sees the whole picture. So, we all have to think, we have to come to these terms on our own. I can't tell you how to see the world or how to understand the world. We really have to grow through the process itself. That's the only way we can have that sincere and earnest understanding of the isness of things. But it's until then, we live to alleviate suffering. We stay true to our nature the best that we can. That's our spiritual practice. That's why we're working this. And eventually we do gain Mother's perspective when we're willing to let go of our own perspective. The way I like to think about it is, everybody knows, it's like a dream. horrible things happen in your dream. And while you're in the dream and believing the dream, you run in fear. You feel the pain. You're in the dream and you believe it to be real. And that's the nature of dreaming. When you wake up in the morning, you don't give it a second thought. You don't feel any guilt for anything that you did bad in the dream. You don't feel anything for what was done to you in the dream. You realize that nothing actually happened. It was just all you having a dream, playing the dream, whatever that is. And so, I like to think that's what helps me accept mother laughing, at the idea of war or being able to laugh in the face of suffering. She knows it was her suffering. She knows it was her lost in a dream, forgetting her nature, herself, forgetting her woken person, asleep in a bed somewhere, her real life, her real body, as it were. And so that, in a metaphor, is a good way to digest this kind of statement from a time when we're not quite, when we're not, we still believe the dream. We still believe that we're real and that we're in the middle of it all, and that is as it should be, as it is. And so, what do? We manifest what we have faith of, our real nature, that we are meant to love. We're meant to be compassionate, caring. We're meant to alleviate suffering. We're meant to be wise. We're meant to be equanimous and caring. And so that's our role in the dream until we understand it. That's our enlightenment. Our enlightenment is an instantaneous understanding of the nature of isness. And we begin to understand it was a dream. That's all. It was play.
Swami,
Yes.
how about the times that Sri Ramakrishna did not take that as a dream? I mean, when he saw suffering, and he was suffering as well, at least crying for his nephew, or all the passages in which he identifies with, he empathizes with that. Not a game anymore, not a game even for him.
Well,
at that point.
No, you're right. Absolutely. And Thakur talks about that. Thakur says he's an avatar, so he has the ability to talk to, in his terms, he says, I can go into the throne room on the 7th floor and I can come back down into the courtyard. I can go up and down the spiritual ladder. I can choose to see this as a dream. I can choose to be at one with the divine. I can choose to be deeply involved. But when he comes here, when he takes on a body, it's just like Jesus. The shortest verse in the Bible is very insightful. The shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. When he went to Lazarus, he wept. Did he not know that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead in 10 minutes? Why is he sitting there weeping with everyone? Because he chose to be companion. He chose to be at the same place so that we could trust his understanding of our nature, trust his understanding of where we're at. And then through that, he can teach us how to deal with it, in a knowing way, in a spiritual way. So these great sages, the avatars in particular, have that ability to go up and down. Ramakrishna was laying in his bed in Kasipur, dying of throat cancer, and he was on his deathbed. He couldn't get up. He could hardly even keep the pudding that they were feeding him in his mouth. And then there's that odd story where he knew that his disciples, the young boys that were his disciples, were walking to the bathing ghat to take a bath, and he knew in his mind's eye that there was a cobra there where they were going. And so Holy Mother says that she suddenly saw Ramakrishna tearing down the stairs, running past her room, which is how she saw him, out across the garden over to the lake, the pond where the snake was, and he shooed the snake away and then ran all the way back and got back into bed and got back on with dying. And so that's the nature of the avatar. He knows the dream. The dream is his dream, and he knows he's dreaming. So anything can be. And so he chooses that knowledge and he runs and he saves his young men and he runs back upstairs and goes back on his deathbed. You know, he wasn't subject to death. He wasn't subject to this Maya because he knew the nature of it. He knew his self. He knew who he was. And but he chose for our sake to identify with being subject to the circumstances of life, the circumstances of being a body and a mind, of being finite and small, and suffering sickness and whatnot. So they are able to be in the dream, and they're able to know that they are the dreamer at the same time, and they are able to do as well as they like, but they make certain they give up certain powers of choice to come down here. You know that to have a body, you have to have a certain amount of ignorance. If there's no ignorance, there's no body mind. You know, you are the universal self. And so they have to take on a bit of ignorance. And Ramakrishna said his ignorance was his love of the devotees. So he took that love of the devotees in order to forget his divine nature so that he could be with the devotees, so that he could experience living with the devotees. So those are just some of the ways the scriptures talk about it. Those of us who are normal folks, or as close to normal as we can be in a day, we don't have that ability to go up and down the ladder. You know, he says that for us, it's lucky if we get to the first or second floor, and then Mother runs down to greet us and brings us the rest of the way. You know, so that's the grace. That's the grace of Mother when she wakes us up and we realize it's a dream. And for us, when we wake up, we're free. If we become a bodhisattva, or if we're someone who doesn't want our freedom, you know, that we're more concerned about the people still in the dream, believing it to be a dream, we have the option of going back. You know, that's the other thing also. When you die, there's not a third party out there who's going to beat you with a stick and say, now your next birth is a pig. Go. Now you're a pig. You choose. You'll take the birth that you want. You'll take that which attracts you, and that will be your life and your experience, and you'll continue on with learning and growing and understanding. So it's not going to be even the punishments. You know, it's like, look, this is very difficult to talk about because I really don't have permission in my own mind to say it. But you know, I've seen these drug addicts, you know, and of course because of choices and habits and whatnot, that becomes a seemingly non-choosing suffering, and it can be intense. You know, that suffering can take you all that particular path can take you all the way down to pure suffering, really. And yet people still pick up the substance and take it, you know, no matter. It's unbelievable. My aunt Johnny died of lung cancer from smoking, and I can remember the last time I saw her, I was like 8 years old, and she was sitting on the couch and she had that big jug of that big canister of oxygen, and all the tubes going up and coming around her face and up into her nostrils. And I was, you know, I was a kid and I was looking at that and I was like, wow. And then I saw her take that thing out of her nose and pull it over to the side and light a cigarette and smoke the cigarette and then put the oxygen back. So you can see what we're up against here. You know, our desires run deep. Our love of pleasure runs deep. And we accept a huge amount of suffering to indulge in a very little amount of pleasure. And that's why we hope to wake up. You know, that's to come to our senses, to have that turnaround moment where you hit the bottom and you realize, what am I doing? This is nuts. And only at that point are you able to actually get yourself together. And before that point comes, you can have your whole family and all of your friends sitting there trying in every way possible to illumine you to your circumstance, and you won't wake up. You won't let go. That's the thing. It's Mahamaya. And she won't let us go until we sincerely want to let go. And that's a hard teaching. And it's harder to understand that it's our responsibility. We don't really live in a world where everybody wants to be responsible for what they do. It's the world always wants to tell us, oh, it's a disease, oh, it's something out of your control, oh, it's genetic, oh, it's this, that, and the other. Well, that's fine. But as long as you blame something else, you remain the victim, and victims do not have the power to change. So at some point, you have to take it on. You have to say, look, this might very well be, I might very well have bad habits, might have made some wrong choices, might have some very deep running desires, but I've got to take responsibility here, because nobody else is going to pick me up. Nobody else is going to help me. And, when that point comes, you can see there are people who have hit that point and become saints. Girish Ghosh, another character in the gospel that we're reading, an alcoholic, bohemian, and used to show up at the master's room drunk and abusive, but he went to the master when he was drunk. That's an accomplishment. That's an amazing movement in his life. And it saved him. It saved him. And Tagore, the devotees, they weren't happy about it. They wanted Tagore to kick him out. Why do you let that drunkard in here to abuse you like that and say all those inappropriate things to you and blah, blah, blah. And he told him to be quiet. He says, you don't know anything. He says, you can't see anything. He says, I see his heart. And so, that was what he is. And that's the magic of Mother also. When you're ready, when you want to let go, when you want to ascend, she knows the heart. She sees that earnestness. And then no matter how far down that rabbit hole you've gone, she will come every bit of that distance through all of that muck to touch you and to set you free. That's divine love. But it has to spark here. You have to come to the point where you want that, because she won't give you what you don't want, right? Okay, all of that. Shakti alone is the root of the universe. This power of God. It's really the power of thinking. I'm playing with that idea more and more, and I absolutely believe that to be true, that the power of God is the power of the mind, that your thoughts create your reality. And those thoughts that are the changing world. There is no outside world. You live in the mind. You live in the world your mind has created. That's why you can have three people in a room in three completely different states of experience. You can have a person who's thrilled and perfectly happy. You can have a person who's horribly depressed and awfully sad. And you can have somebody who's anger beyond words, but they're all in the same room, dealing with the same thing. It's like me and my two brothers, it's like we grew up so radically different, but I'm, this monk, a Hindu monk living in a monastery, and my brother John is, got a big Confederate flag tattooed on his chest. He's a big Trump fan and, in and out of jail. And then I've got my youngest brother who's, a pot farmer in California and dreaded hair and love life and happiness for everyone around him. He's just got the kindest heart in the world. And so, but we all grew up in the same family with the same parents, and we couldn't, we barely can even talk to each other because we're so different. We're like, what in the world? What are you doing? We all three look at each other and are like, what are you doing? So this is the world. This is the play of God, the play of diversity. Shakti alone is the root of the universe. That primal energy has two aspects, vidya and avidya. Avidya deludes. Okay, so vidya is light. And so there's the light which brings you toward oneness. Anything that moves you toward unity is light. Anything that moves you toward multiplicity is avidya, is ignorance, is dark. And so in this world, there's two forces at play with each other, light and dark. And so he says, avidya conjures up lust and greed, which casts the spell. Right? That's an amazing thing. Sri Ramakrishna says that all of the suffering that we see, all of it, everything that you see in this manifest universe, this world of change, is because of lust and greed. That it's lust and greed that has created all of this. And so it's because of our love of those two things that we suffer, that we fall down that rabbit hole. Vidya begets devotion, kindness, wisdom, and love, which lead one to God. This avidya must be propitiated, and that is the purpose of the rites of Shakti worship. The devotee assumes various attitudes toward Shakti in order to propitiate her. The attitude of a handmaid or a hero or a child. A hero's attitude is to please her, even as a man pleases a woman through intercourse. The worship of Shakti is extremely difficult. It is no joke. I passed 2 years as the handmaid and companion of the Divine Mother. Fascinating if you want to read about that experience. He dressed as a woman for 2 years, so much so that people did not know him to be a man at all. He lived as a woman for 2 years to worship God as the handmaiden. And so you read these different sadhanas that he went through in a book called The Great Master, written by Swami Sharadananda. And it's fascinating and overwhelming, the level at which he was dedicated to his spiritual practice, to his life. Just unbelievable. So he spent those 2 years as a handmaid and companion of the Divine Mother, but my natural attitude has always been that of a child toward its mother. I regard the breasts of any woman as those of my own mother. Women are, all of them, the veritable images of Shakti. So you see, he saw the divine in every woman. He saw every woman as being mother, God as mother. In northwest India, the bride holds a knife in her hand at the time of marriage. In Bengal, a nut cutter. The meaning is that the bridegroom, with the help of the bride, who is the embodiment of the divine power, will sever the bondage of illusion. This is the heroic attitude. I never worship the Divine Mother that way. My attitude toward her is that of a child toward its mother. So we have those different ways of approaching God. You know, in the Vedanta, you can approach God as being your child. You can approach God as being your mother or your father or your lover or your friend. And it's up to you. And you're not stuck with any one of them. You can have each of those relationships at different times and feel nourished depending on your circumstance. And God is all of those things to you. You know, in a real way, she is your mother and she is your father. And she is your friends, and she is your family. She is all of these things. And so, of course, you can approach the divine through any one of those relationships as it strengthens you or appeals to you. It's quite a wonderful part of practice. The bride is the very embodiment of Shakti. Haven't you noticed at the marriage ceremony how the groom sits behind like an idiot? But the bride, oh, she is so bold. After attaining God, one forgets his external splendor, the glories of his creation. One doesn't think of God's glories after one has seen him. The devotee, once immersed in God's bliss, doesn't calculate any more about outer things. When I see Narendra, I don't need to ask him, what's your name? Where do you live? What is the time for such questions? Once a man asked Hanuman which day of the fortnight it was. Brother, said Hanuman, I don't know anything of the day of the week or the fortnight or the position of the stars. I think of Rama alone. That singleness of mind, just beneath the moving mind, beneath the Shakti power is Brahman, the immovable, the unchanging, the absolute, the perfect love, perfect wisdom, perfect existence. And that both of those exist in us simultaneously. Brahman, the pure mind and Brahman are one and the same. And so when the mind is calm, when there's no me and mine in there mixing it up and creating thoughts of past that build the ego, when that is gone, what remains is the absolute unchanging, that peace that passes all understanding. And so we're all working, with those in order to find that immovable knowledge within of oneness, of that one without a second in there. And once we find that inner light, slowly for some and very quickly for others, we lose interest in the world. It's not that we become supermen or superwomen of discipline so that we can grit our teeth and make it through this world without falling to, these various temptations. It's not like that. It's that we touch something beautiful inside and we can't get there fast enough. We can't get enough of it. We want nothing that blocks us from that experience. And through your sadhana, as you grow, you learn to understand those days where you obey lust and greed or run after worldly pleasures. Prayer is very difficult. And those times when you're doing much better and you've got your focus together and you're hanging in there, and you sit down and have that beautiful meditation, where you can just freely go before the Lord. Now, of course, ideally, the reason we can't do that is because of ego. The reason that goes back and forth is because of that. We're identified with ego, and the ego wants to be responsible and wants to be the one that does it all. And so when we're not doing it all, we feel guilty and we feel shameful, and we have trouble sitting before the Lord. But Mother is trying to teach us that it is by her grace that this is there. And as we learn to accept that, we give up our ego, because that infinite grace requires that infinite humility. We give up that ego, and by giving up that ego, we find that silence that lies below the mind. And we enjoy that communion with the divine, with the bliss. And we can go there at will because of that grace, which is our faith, which is our understanding. And he says, after that happens, after attaining God, we forget his external splendor. We forget all about this. Yes, the mountains are beautiful, but nothing near as beautiful as the presence of the beloved inside. Yes, this world is great fun, but nothing like the divine dance of ecstasy in your own heart with the beloved. So these real renunciation, it's not that monks grit their teeth, like I say, and force themselves into small cells and suffer from the for the sake of God like that. It's not like that. Mature renunciation has nothing to do with what you've left behind. It has everything to do with what you're running toward. And that's the secret of spiritual life, that we don't leave things of the world because we're forced to, because we're not allowed to, because we're forbidden from. We leave the things of the world because we have tasted and touched something infinitely more beautiful, something that actually gives us what we're looking for without ending, without having to be constantly replaced. And so that's mature renunciation. That's mature spiritual life, when we're living for the love of God and we're finding it in everyone and everything. October 16th, 1882. It was Monday, a few days before the Durga Puja, the festival of the Divine Mother. Sri Ramakrishna was in a very happy state of mind, for Narendra was with him. Narendra had brought 2 or 3 young members of the Brahmo Samaj to the temple garden. Besides these, Rakal, Ramlal, Hazra, and M were with the master. Narendra had his midday meal with Sri Ramakrishna, and afterward a temporary bed was made on the floor of the master's room so that the disciples might rest a while. A mat was spread over which was placed a quilt covered with a white sheet. A few cushions and pillows completed the simple bed. Like a child, the master sat near Narendranath on the bed. He talked with the devotees in great delight, with a radiant smile lighting his face, and his eyes fixed on Narendra. He was giving them various spiritual teachings, interspersing these with incidents from his own life. Master, after I had experienced samadhi, my mind craved intensely to hear only about God. I would always search for places where they were reciting or explaining the sacred books, such as the Bhagavata, the Mahabharata, the Adhyatma Ramayana. I used to go to Krishna Kishore to hear him read the Adhyatma Ramayana. What a tremendous faith Krishna Kishore had. Once, while at Vrindavan, he felt thirsty and went to a well. Near it, he saw a man standing. On being asked to draw a little water for him, the man said, I belong to a low caste, sir. You are a Brahmin. How can I draw water for you? Krishna Kishore said, take the name of Shiva. By repeating his holy name, you will make yourself pure. The low caste man did as he was told, and Krishna Kishore, an orthodox Brahmin that he was, drank the water. What tremendous faith! Once a holy man came to the bank of the Ganges and lived near the bathing ghat at Aryadaha, not far from Dakshineshwar. We thought of paying him a visit. I said to Haladhari, Krishna Kishore and I are going to see a holy man. Will you come with us? Haladhari replied, what is the use of seeing a mere human body, which is no better than a cage of clay? Haladhari was a student of the Gita and Vedanta philosophy, and therefore referred to the holy man as a mere cage of clay. I repeated this to Krishna Kishore. With great anger, he said, how impudent of Haladhari to make such a remark! How can he ridicule as a cage of clay the body of a man who constantly thinks of God, who meditates on Rama, and has renounced all for the sake of the Lord? Doesn't he know that such a man is the embodiment of spirit? He was so upset by Haladhari's remarks that he would turn his face away from him whenever he met him in the temple garden and stopped speaking to him. Part of the play going on even there. But this notion, this great faith of God being in all, God being your purity, being my purity, that's that grace, that we're talking about. And so he was able to, of course, for us in a Western perspective, it's difficult to understand the idea of caste. But, it's the same as if you went to, if there was some very unfortunate homeless person who was very unappealing in every way to you, and he had a dirty glass of water to offer you, it would take a great deal of humility on your part, a great deal of grace on your part to accept that glass of water and to drink it with no fear or no sense of revulsion or pushing it away at all, at any level within himself. And the reason that the second story about the body of clay, the reason that was so disturbing was because somebody had not had that realization, did not know those things to be true, but had mental knowledge of it, had worldly knowledge of it. In the mind, he knew the philosophy, he knew the teachings, but he drew an improper connection because he was expressing something that wasn't honest for him. He wasn't being where he was. He wasn't obeying his own knowledge and understanding. And so he got it wrong. And so it's a good warning for us. It's quite a temptation when we learn these things to run around, that God is everywhere present and always perfect. And say these things without seeing them, without knowing them. And while that's fine to live that way within, to say those things and to practice those things and to repeat those things within ourselves, when we start wearing them like beads around our neck for everybody to see and hear, oh boy, we get ourselves in a real pickle. That's very, very hard to get out of. You know, when spiritual life and spiritual practice become the source of your delusion, because you're taking pride in them, because you're valuing them as the thing itself, and not keeping your eyes on the beloved, and not developing that inner relationship, not just a practice of rituals and knowledge, but a life, an inner life in the presence of the divine, in the presence of God. There's a big difference in the way that that affects the world. You know, it's a very big difference in the way that you will affect the people around you. You know, to be a remember the Saturday Night Live, the church lady? You know, that smug self-righteousness. That's the danger of being religious. And I think that's why the world has finally made that distinction between religious and spiritual. You know, to be spiritual is to have the relationship within, and it's not a show for anybody. It's your own reality, your own satisfaction, and you act from that. You're not doing anything, you're not pretending anything. You're acting from that, you know, and you look at somebody, you see the beloved in their eyes, and you honestly talk to the beloved in their eyes, and consequently you're treating them with great love and great respect and great reverence, you know, because you know who they really are. You're not caught up in their play, in their costume. You know the name of the actor within. So it's a very different approach, and it's something that we have to be quite careful about in life. So we'll read one more paragraph here. Once Krishna Kishore asked me, "Why have you cast off the sacred thread?" So in India, Brahmins, when they in their coming of age ceremony, they get a sacred thread that they tie across their chest like that, and it stays there their whole life. That it never is taken off. It never comes off the body. If they're a Brahmin, that thread is always there. And so Ramakrishna removed his. And so Krishna Kishore says, "Why have you cast off the sacred thread?" I mean, that's a horrible wrongdoing in Indian culture. "In those days of God vision, I felt as if I were passing through the great storm of Ashwin, and everything had blown away from me. No trace of my old self was left. I lost all consciousness of the world. I could hardly keep my cloth on my body, not to speak of the sacred thread. I said to Krishna Kishore, 'Ah, you will understand if you ever happen to be as intoxicated with God as I was at that time.'" And so this for him to be able to especially Ramakrishna, a Brahmin, an Orthodox Brahmin, to take his thread off is an amazing understanding. You know, he outgrew it. He was no longer in bondage to identity, you know, with characteristics. And interestingly enough, you know, as a member of the Ramakrishna order, part of the ceremony for becoming a monk is all the Brahmins, and actually, well, to make it equanimous, when you become a brahmachari, when you join the order, you're considered a Brahmin, you know, because according to Vivekananda, the real definition of a Brahmin is someone who loves God and pursues the divine. And so everybody is given a sacred thread. Even I had a sacred thread. And then when you take sannyas, part of the ceremony is to cut that thread and throw it into the fire as an offering, which is an elimination of ego, an elimination of identity, an elimination of anything that separates you from the divine, from the whole. You know, that you don't emphasize your difference. You let go of the stories of your mind that make you special, that single you out and make you different. And you go for that equanimous love as identity, that wisdom. And so, all right, well, it's 8 o'clock there here in Colorado. Anybody have a question or more comments, insights? Perfect. We're going to realize God in no time flat. This is amazing. Very good. Wonderful. Be well, everyone. Be happy.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Swami.
Lord. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ever free, ever pure, ever blissful. Good night.